This one's called Alive, and we'll be playing it at 4 o'clock this afternoon on the second stage as well. Okay, so as I'm going to play some more tunes from the Mask of Judas album, The Mesmerist, and I'm just going to talk at you guys about maybe just some things that I thought about when writing. But if you have any questions, please feel free to interject. Also, Ernie Ball, very kind to give me loads and loads of strings. And as there's probably enough to have like a few sets each now. So, but I was going to give them away as things, but it's cool. So come to me at the end and we'll sort it out. All right, so that was called Alive. Now I'm playing an 8-string guitar which is something I regret now. But at the time when I bought it, it made me write all this music. And what was great about it at the time was that there's no other... There was lots of eight string had just become kind of popular with animals as leaders and stuff like that, and it was a new looking instrument. And what I liked about it at the time, at least, is that I could use it as a compositional thing. I love improvising. I can't really improvise on an eight string because there's too much going on. But as an arrangement instrument for metal, it's fantastic because you can treat it like a giant piano. So this is tuned like a regular guitar. And then I've tuned the low strings differently than standard. I've got a low C and a low F. And that's particularly for this song. The song is based around a 1-4 chord sequence. So C being the 1 chord and F being the 4 chord, sorry. But it's been minorized. So you can go C to F minor. And there's some riffs. And that was made by the frustration of a lot of bands at the time, because I was a bit kind of elitist in my own head at the time. Oh, they always use open strings and only play in one tonality, which I know is very naive now. But at the time, I used that to enable me to have a chord sequence in the lower strings, which was cool for me. And then I based around the chord sequence of this. It's kind of a basic idea of just going. So we're taking seventh chords. This is all you were asking about jazz. And seventh chords aren't really jazz. People call them jazz just because they sound different than your regular major and minor. But by taking that, coming at a riff from a point of view of a chord sequence, I think in general, is very useful for creating melodic movement in your riff writing, rather than just having sort of static, which is great. Static grooves are fantastic to build things on, but also having a chord sequence underneath is super useful. So let me just demonstrate what I did for the main riff. So, it sounds kind of techie, but it's not techie because it's just a simple... It's like you could probably hear this in a Bee Gees song or something. So it's just basically a C minor 7 to a D minor 7 to an E flat major 7, sorry. But then I took the arpeggios and did some string skipping with them. And that's how that riff was born. But I wouldn't have come up with that if it wasn't for me thinking without chord sequences in the first place. Does that make sense? Is that cool? Hi, Tom. How you doing? All right, I'm going to play another song. But first, I'm just going to tune my guitar to standard 8-string tuning, which is low B and F. Now, going back to what I was saying before, it felt like having an 8-string gave me an opportunity to do what I wanted to do, rather than what had already been kind of written, which I know is not completely true, but it made me feel like I was more... I was doing something for myself rather than for the sake of... If you pick up a 6-string instrument, you can start to come into the cliches, and now you can come into cliches on the 8-string as well, of course, but for me it felt pretty regular to do it on the 8-string as a writer. I hope this is making sense. I was driving until 4 o'clock in the morning last night, and then I ran to this masterclass all the way from Luton. Right, okay, so this song is called Gravity. And like I say, just interject, just shout at me if you have any questions at all, or if not, or just insult me, it's up to you. But I'm going to play this song, it's called Gravity. Now this got me my job at Lick Library. I did a video instrumental of this on my YouTube channel many years ago, and it got tons and tons and tons of hits. I don't know why all my other videos don't have hits, but this one got a lot of hits. And because of this, Andy James phoned me up and asked me to come into Lick Library and start making DVDs and stuff for them. So it was really cool. And it's one of those unexpected things. This is just just me being silly. It's over the top, but it's good fun. And all throughout this, I'm using just the minor pentatonic scale, but not in a bluesy sense. I'm using it in a shreddy sense. but not in a 80s shreddy sense. Let's hear. Thank you. So that was, I'm really into a guitarist called Paul Gilbert, and he took pentatonic scales and he would do like really silly things like I can't do it, but like so taking pentatonics as 3 notes per string rather than like typical. You can. Then you put some chromatics in there, and it sounds like Guthrie, but that was a bad version. But you get the idea. But what I like about it, I'm going to demonstrate this in the next couple of tunes, that you can take the 3 note per string pentatonic, and then do things with the patterns that make it sound less pentatonic and more kind of abstract, which could be desirable or not desirable. But let me just demonstrate. Here's some delay. So if you took a E minor, I mean, I know I've got loads of strings on, but take my word for it that this is... That's a 2-octave minor pentatonic scale, but played with a 3-note and a 1-note system. So you've got 3 notes, 1 note, 3 notes, 1 note, 3 notes. And that's cool. I mean, Frank Gambale does a lot of stuff, which I'm not going to demonstrate. I'm practicing that stuff at the moment, but like, using it for economy picking. But what I like to do, because I can't do that stuff, I made it 2-1-2, so I missed the middle note of the 3-note string bit. Which makes it sound a little bit more, I don't know, to my ears it reminds me of Holdsworthy sort of vibe. And if you do that with the whole, if you're playing over an E minor and you do the pentatonic superimpositions, so I could play E minor and F sharp minor pentatonics. You see, I can't improvise on an H string, but you get the idea that you can move those things around, and it's the pentatonic. It's not some jazzy thing. It's just stretching your fingers out, and it's just a really good way for laymen like me to sound kind of sophisticated. So that's one thing there. Okay, so any questions so far? No? Cool. So I'm going to play this next tune. This is the first single from the Mask of Judas album. It's called The Conspirator, and I find this one really hard to play like all the other ones. But this one has the bebop thing I was talking about. So I can't play jazz, but I love listening to fusion and Chick Corea and all that stuff, and transcribing those kind of crazy horn parts or keyboard lines and all that kind of stuff. It sounds awesome to my ears. So for me, picking up different things like chromatic enclosures has been really useful and something I've really warmed to as a style. I talked about a minute ago taking the pentatonic and just filling in the gaps, which is one way of doing it, but that's more of a shred thing. I'd say in bebop and jazz, they highlight chord tones. In fact, there's a particular lick in this tune. So that idea, that's just highlighting a B minor 7th. But I'm using different smaller patterns to create the enclosure. So within a 3-note per string setting, it might be the scale pattern I'm looking at could be just a simple pattern, but I'm using a device in order to find it will land on. So the chromatic notes land on the upbeats, and strong notes land on the downbeats. Okay, that's the bebop thing. Okay, and that's what when people talk about bebop scales, that's what it was for, is because they played 8th note swung all the time, and they'd have to have patterns that fit in. So it's kind of like this whole improvisation thing is a bit misty with the old jazz thing. That's not a joke. Maybe misty is actually a jazz standard. But the idea being that you take these sort of more mechanical ideas, like you take a lick, and then you can sort of manipulate them into your improvisation. So let me just play it, and then I'll talk a bit more about it. But I also incorporated one more thing just to bore you with. I put it in the riffs as well. So there's a riff. You'll hear that come up, but let's see if I can play it first. Here we go. This is called The Conspirator. There's something actually interesting in there which isn't silly and full of notes. I had my volume pedal down for the whole of that. Right, so there were some chords in the middle. I'm really a big fan of a band called Block Party, from like, I can't remember, the noughties. And they did a lot of like layering of chords harmonized to create these, and then you can hear this in like Periphery. They'll just layer, they might play a C major 7 and an E minor 7 over the top of each other, like as a full chord, and you get this like this kind of huge, chewy sound. And if you hear the recording of that, hopefully, because I'm playing over the top of it at the moment, you're not going to hear that properly because I'm just hammering away. I even forgot the chord halfway through. But the idea being that they harmonize. And one really cool thing, I got this from trying to emulate gospel sort of chords. And they do a lot of things where they put the fifth in the bass of a chord. I mean, if you take your classic A chord, bar chord shape, but just take the E shape of it, just sounds, not with this tone and this guitar, but it does sound quite nice when you play it on a Strat or something. But as the arrangement of that fifth, so you have the fifth in the bass note, root third. You'll hear that in lots of vocal harmonies as well, as a kind of common. That's a massive generalisation, but being a very common way of layering vocal parts, having the root harmony and then the fifth underneath, and then you can get creative and use that as a jumping off point. But in general, having the fifth in the bass is great because the bass player has too many strings in the band as well, and he will play obviously the lower notes and take heart, and it just kind of creates a bit more of this rather than just kind of frontwards. It kind of creates more space for each instrument to come out. That makes sense. So for writing, experimenting with using fifths in the bass, that's always a good thing. I enjoy doing that.
If you're putting the fifth in the bass in the guitar chord, are you also doing the fifth on the actual bass guitar as well?
No. So you're playing a lower octave down. Although then you can get experimental. I mean, that's what's great if you change the quality of the chord by making the because your ears will always kind of hear the lowest note kind of as the implied harmony, even though that's technically a second inversion chord that you're playing. If the bass player's hammering that fifth down, then it could be a second inversion. But for the metal thing, I think it's good to just take some of these rules of harmony and just go throw them out the window a bit, but learn them first, and then if you listen to like Megadeth style riffs, it's just like moving any kind of minor and major third around a Phrygian root note progression, but the thirds might not actually correspond to the actual harmony. It's just something that sounds cool, and the idea being that really metal is about, well, nowadays I think it's very melodic style, really, but people think it sounds horrible because it's dissonant, but the dissonance is beautiful in its own right. So, and good metal, I think, has, this is my opinion, but like a nice mixture of everything. You can hear the nasty and the good, So, I've forgotten what song we're going to play next. Okay, so this next song is called Brand New Conquest, and it'll probably be the second to last song I play. But thank you for coming along, and we'll do some questions in a minute. But this one was inspired by George Michael's Careless Whisper. So it's the same chord sequence in the main riff when it comes in. And then the verse section is inspired by Crystal Maze, the old theme tune.
We're
Thank you. Joff, the drummer from Mask of Judas, has just entered the room. And the reason why I didn't come in straight away with that track is normally he holds my hand and counts me in with that section. So that's why I missed the first arpeggio completely. Very gently. Yeah. All right, so we're about to finish up. Come up and grab strings and picks and stuff if you want to. We've got 9s, 10s, 11s, and we've got some picks. So yeah. Any questions? Or I mean, I can answer some questions, or I can do one more tune. But, okay, yes.
How on earth do you remember such complex parts?
I wrote this album about 7 years ago, and it took me about 4 months to write each song. And there's 8 songs on the album written by me. And when I say written, the guitar parts, just and the arrangement, but then everybody else in the band they make it sound like a song. Without it's just like a click track and me just going over the top. But what helps me remember the parts is, this is where harmony and knowledge of theory helps. I know what the chord sequences are. I think of it as the same as learning a Stevie Wonder tune. You remember the underlying chord sequences, and I know the arpeggios that go for this arpeggio idea, or it's this, and I've played them so often. We released the album last year, but it had been recorded for about 3 years. It just took a long time to get together. So it's just over and over again. And I'm doing, as a session guitarist, I do a lot of other stuff where I have to remember lots of different sets, and I find it harder to remember simpler music, actually, than remembering my own music. Because I spent a lot of time with my music. I think that's why.
Because you wrote it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
For anybody else to learn that part would be probably a 4-month job.
Yeah, well, there's the other guitar player in the band, Reese Forward, will be on stage with us later on. He's immensely talented guitar player, and he learns it very quickly. I asked him to be in the band because he's far better than I am at guitar, so he could just learn it and do it. But we've had people dep for one of us when I haven't been able to do it or he hasn't been able to do it, and it's a challenge. But then I haven't transcribed any of it either. But I think it's a challenge learning anybody else's, because when you're learning especially this sort of music where it's technical, you're learning what's a habit of somebody else. Reese does some really good gallopy, like Megadeth style picking things, and I just can't. It's not part of me. I grew up listening to Buddy Holly, so playing thrash metal rhythms isn't for me. But when I learn his parts, I'm like, oh, geez, this is too much, and it takes me a while. So it's always good to keep that in mind, I think, as well. Whenever you're learning anybody's stuff, you're learning their habits, which is why when you get a transcription of like a great Gary Moore solo or something, and some of the licks just look mental on paper, and they sound gorgeous on the recording, but to get the transcriber's written every detail, and sometimes these details can be written down, but there's the essence behind them. It's that person that's doing it as well. So, yeah. Any other questions?
I was going to say, you can tell that solo is really inspired by Jason Becker, or maybe I would go as far as Jeff Loomis.
Yeah, I probably was listening to. I was doing a lot of Jeff Loomis-y things at the time, especially the chord sequence with the root to the flat 5, major 7th going on, and
Harmonised bends as well. It screams Jeff Loomis.
yeah. Well, Jeff Loomis for me is like a weird amalgamation of Jason Becker and Marty Friedman and Cacophony, which is and that a lot of the music on this album is inspired by Cacophony and Racer X and all the 80s shrapnel shred guys. It's nothing to do with Periphery or Animals. I mean, there is a bit of that, and they're great, and I love them, but this is what I was saying at the start. I probably came across wrong. The 8-string was this like, well, everyone's doing shred on the 6-string or the 80s shred. Why don't I try and do something 80s shreddy on the 8-string? And now I'm 31 and I'm regretting it. But it's fun to play and it keeps my chops up. And it's really fun to play it live with the band. That's the main thing. Any other questions?
I couldn't hear Careless whispering.
Oh, okay. I got a minute or two. Sorry, Carnes, let me know. It's not a Hercules music stand, you see. That's why I did that. Right. So right, that was a really bad chord playing there, but like the idea being that was D minor. That's how I was thinking of that. Then G minor, and then I forgot forgotten what I did for that bit. Yeah, that was just a minor. So that was the chord sequence of Careless Whisper, I think, D minor, G minor, B flat major, A minor 7. That's where I came up with that. So one more point actually to do this is the solo and the verse, all that. Right, all of that is the same chord sequence as the solo. So this is another thing I'm a big believer, because another thing for remembering songs is just only having 2 or 3 riffs and then making as many variations rhythmically, dynamically, textually as possible. Otherwise, there's a lot of people get into tech music and it just comes out as a stream of ideas. That's when it goes, oh, it's just too much to listen to. But so I try and approach it from a pop sensibility of just keeping it real simple and then just rinsing. So that way, I either forget which variation it is. That's the only risk I run. But yeah. We've got time for any more? Anyone got anything else? Cool. I think we'll finish there then. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Thank you.